500,000 people in this country are sleeping on the street, are unhoused. Most people in this country appear to be rent stressed. If this problem gets solved, what other problems do you think would be solved because of that? Would it create this domino effect?
Absolutely. Housing is central to each of our lives. The place where we're able to rest our head at night determines so much about how we get to live, how we show up at our jobs, how our kids show up at schools, what our neighborhoods look and feel like, how our cities do economically and otherwise. Solving this problem is at the core of solving for so much of the pain and strife that we experience as a community, as a nation today. And it has those types of positive implications for tenants themselves, but also for the American economy, right? Last summer, we saw historic levels of inflation, and we're still experiencing some of the economic fallout of that inflation crisis today, potential for recession as well. Rent was one of the core drivers of overall inflation, right? It was one of the core and most enduring drivers of overall inflation. For too long, housing has been treated as a domestic policy issue. It's sort of been relegated to a third rail that no one wants to touch. The federal government has said it's state and local governments say it's the federal government's responsibility. No one really wants to do anything about it. Today, in 2023, it's undeniable that at every level of government, we need proactivity, we need vision, we need creative solutions. And that's not only good for tenants, that's good for the American economy, and it's good for our country overall.
You mentioned that this is a third rail in politics, but what's interesting is this affects everyone, no matter your party, no matter your age, no matter your race, no matter anything about you, housing affects you. So why is this a third rail?
It comes down to racism and classism. I think there's a much deeper dive into history that I could get into, but I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. That's a lot of the reason that housing has not been touched with a 1,000-foot pole at the federal government level for years and years. And that's starting to change, not necessarily because the political will has shifted so significantly, but because the conditions are so dire, right? We are in an emergency situation, like the HUD secretary said to you, and something has got to give, right? It is untenable that we continue in a world where rents increase 20% year over year in many regions across the country, and tenants' wages have been stagnated for years and years, right? Something's got to give. More and more people are ending up on the streets. This issue has become so high-pitched for so many people. And to your point, this is an issue that crosses every line that our opponents might try to use to divide us, right? It crosses class lines, it crosses race lines, it crosses age lines, it crosses party affiliation. And that should scare our opposition, right? I've organized trailer parks where there are Trump voters and there are Bernie Sanders voters, and there are Black people and there are Mexican people and there are white people. There are people of all class backgrounds, and they may have nothing else in common. But what they have in common is their struggle for a safe and secure home and a safe and secure community. That brings them together, and they as a force are unstoppable.
Something you keep saying, the rent is too damn high, and voters across the aisle agree with you there. So what could the federal government do tomorrow in terms of controlling that rent?
Yeah. The president could sign an executive order that directs all kinds of action across the federal government to regulate rent. It is our view that the most material way that the federal government could regulate our rents is through this type of FHFA regulation on federally financed properties. That would apply to millions of units of housing across the country that have been financed in part or in full by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. By instituting regulations like that, FHFA could immediately intervene in the market in a pretty major way. And what Fannie and Freddie will say is, we don't control the market. We're influencers in the market, but we don't control it. But here's the thing. They're major influencers in the market. Between Fannie and Freddie, that's 40% of the multifamily housing market. Where Fannie and Freddie go, the rest of the market follows, right? They're table setters. So if that many units in the market get regulated by some kind of federal policy, that is a major intervention that would improve conditions for tenants across the country and stabilize our communities as well.
Tara Raghuveer, thank you for joining me. It's an important conversation.